Hello, I am with Steve Genco, leading author of the book Neuromarketing for Dummies. Steve, thank you for taking the time to join this conversation about neuromarketing. Steve, let's begin with the basic things. What is neuromarketing? What is the definition, or your definition of neuromarketing?
Well, neuromarketing is basically the study of consumer behavior in terms of the processes that go on in the human brain, and applying a huge amount of knowledge that has been developed over the last couple of decades in the brain sciences, by which I include psychology, neuroscience, and also behavioral economics, and the application of those insights and lessons to topics of marketing and consumer behavior, consumer decision making, and basically looking at the consumer as kind of the full picture of the consumer brain that we have today, as opposed to the kind of more limited model that we used to have before this new information became available.
Right, right. What are the complexities of neuromarketing?
There's a necessity for neuromarketers to have a pretty strong scientific background. It's not a do-it-yourself kind of a set of methodologies, and there's a whole spectrum of methodologies, some of which are very detailed and require PhD level scientific training in order to do. There's some others that are more easier to perform, but to understand how to interpret the data, you still need a pretty strong background. So I think the biggest complexities of neuromarketing are that you have to be serious about the science, and neuromarketing is a field that, at least today, people come into from other fields where they've kind of already established credentials and scientific knowledge, and they're applying that knowledge to marketing and consumer behavior.
Good. Generally speaking, what is the way to measure the neuromarketing projects? Is there anything like a ROI, return on investment, or what would be those kind of measurements for successful measurements?
Well, ultimately, return on investment is kind of the ultimate measure. Marketers need to justify their costs to the companies that they work for. Measurement is a piece of marketing. Ultimately, it's the marketing itself that is effective or not effective. There's a certain cost to testing that marketing, pre-testing, post-testing, ongoing monitoring, and any large product company or small product company, for that matter, needs to determine how it's going to allocate its spending, its expenses, in order to maximize the overall ROI. So that's the kind of long-term sophisticated answer, but in fact, companies tend to measure their research results, I think, in a less quantitative or precise manner. And it's often a kind of a satisficing sort of model where, are things going along okay? Are we selling, are we increasing share, or are we maintaining share? And as long as the boat is kind of floating along, at the appropriate level, everybody's happy. When something bad happens, then there's a flurry of activity. What do we need to do? What do we need to adjust? And then you might see a lot more research, and then you might see changes, and so it tends to be somewhat situational in terms of how the company as a whole responds to their marketing situation.
Good. Talking about the methodologies, I would like to ask you about the sample size. On the one hand, how big should be the sample size, and on the other side, how important it is to have a representative sample for the studies? What's the importance of that?
I think sample size is actually a somewhat overrated problem. I think that a lot of times marketers and market researchers are more comfortable talking about sample size because it's an issue they have to deal with in every kind of research. And so the issue of these small sample sizes in neuromarketing seems to be something they can grasp onto and talk about. But in fact, sample size is simply a matter of statistical power. The sample size is not, there's no number that's an appropriate sample. You need to know the strength of the effect that you're measuring. And then you need to be able to calculate, a power calculation in order to determine what is the sample size that you need in order to extract that signal, from the noise of the data. So for some kinds of effects, brain effects, they are very prominent signal-to-noise ratio, and because of that, in order to identify them, you don't need a big sample. Now, the second part of your question is kind of where the important issues are, which is what is the population that your sample is representing.
Yeah.
And if it may be the case that a signal can be identified with 20 or 15 people, but if you're interested in what that signal represents in terms of a kind of consumer behavior, a kind of consumer response, and you're interested in the response of a particular segment of the population, then you have to be sure that the people that you're testing are in the right sample, are in the right group segment. But a lot of what we're interested in is comparing segments. So the sample size issue kind of goes away. If you want to compare, so say that in order to determine the presence of a signal, you need 20 people. Let's say for an EEG or some kind of a methodology. Well, so you need 20 people to determine whether the strength of that signal in a particular group. But say you want to compare men and women. Now you need to go up to 40 people because you need to have 20 men and 20 women because each of those subsegments needs to have an adequate number to be able to identify the signal. If you also want to do young and old, now you're up to 80 because you have to take each of those groups and you have to take young men, young women, older women. Now you're up to 80 people. So it's really easy to get the sample size up if the comparisons that you want to make require comparing different groups. Product loyalists versus product agnostics. New users versus long-term users. Every time you want to compare any of those groups, you have to double the sample size.
Yeah.
And that's actually a limitation because unlike survey methodology where you can start off with a big sample and you can slice and dice according to maybe you identify an interesting distinction in the sample. People who live in a certain sized city, in a certain region, who shop at a certain store, they seem to have some interesting characteristics. You can kind of tease that out of the data. But in experimental research, you have to predefine those groups. You can't find them afterwards. So that's often something that folks that are used to survey research have a little trouble understanding that they have to pre-specify. And you can't just slice and dice the data. You have to create an experimental protocol that gives you each cell that you want to study, each comparison, you have to have enough people in each cell to have the statistical power to do the comparison.
The first part of the question was because I have read somewhere that the golden number for a sample size in neuromarketing is 30. And that's why I am asking you
for some kinds of studies to identify some kinds of patterns, 30 may be perfectly adequate. But 30 of whom? You want 30 women, you want 30 young men, you want 30, buyers of a product that buy it at least 10 times a year. So often I find that the most powerful research has some kind of built-in comparison. An absolute measure doesn't mean very much. If you so just kind of have a general population, and in the general population, the amount of attention allocated to this ad is, number, whatever the number is, any number. That's much less helpful than the amount of attention allocated to this ad was 47, and this ad was 39, and given the sample sizes, that's a statistically significant difference. So now you know something as opposed to a general level. Excuse me. That's harder.
Yeah, and the second part of the question was because I've read again somewhere that it's not important the composition of the sample. If you do a neuromarketing study in Sao Paulo, Brazil, you can extrapolate to people in the UK or Finland. Some people are claiming so because they share the idea. They claim that the brain does not have so much variability among people, and they are claiming those things.
I think it's a kind of a misnomer. I'm aware that those claims have been made, and I think it confuses a couple of levels of analysis. It is the case that if you get excited about something and I get excited about something, we get excited in the same way. So, we might have arousal, skin conductance increase, we might have frontal asymmetry. That's the way our bodies and our brains process being excited about something. But you may be excited about something completely different than what I'm excited about. So it's not the machinery of excitement that is relevant. It's what is exciting to you. And so that varies significantly, and there's a lot of really interesting research coming out now on cultural differences, even perception, the way in which some Asian cultures and Western cultures perceive a scene, and what they, using eye tracking, where they focus on the scene, literally the way in which what seems to be a very hardwired perceptual function can be different in different cultural contexts, in the way in which people learn how in our culture we sort of absorb information. So there's a lot of really interesting differences. So the idea that the Finns and the Brazilians and the Spaniards all respond the same way at one level is true. All of our brains work pretty much the same, but what we respond to is going to be very different.
Okay, well, that's great. Good. Anything is perfect. Neuromarketing is not an exception. Mm-hmm. What are the limitations of neuromarketing?
Well, there's a lot of limitations. The first one is that most people don't even like the term neuromarketing. It kind of got foisted onto the field before people realized that it itself is a confusing term. Neuromarketing implies it's a different kind of marketing. Marketing to the neuro and marketing to the brain. Well, all marketing is neuromarketing. Yeah. The idea that neuromarketing is somehow more manipulative, it's more threatening. It's making us do things that we might not want to do. In fact, that's what marketing. That's what marketing is. Marketing is persuasion, attempting to persuade and influence people to do, or seduction in Robert Heath's model. To do what you want them to do. I want you to do what I want you to do, and I will apply various techniques in order to get you to do it. Neuromarketing is simply a set of measurements measuring different things in order to see how effective efforts to influence are.
Oh.
So it's not a method to influence itself. It's a measurement regimen, I think. So it gets you off on the wrong track. What are some of the other challenges with neuromarketing? Well, I've written some things about this, and I think if I can remember what some of the points I've made in the past, I think that scalability is a big issue.
Okay.
So being able to handle the needs of really large companies that want to do research all over the world, they want to turn it around overnight. Scale and speed are challenging. The more sophisticated the methodology, the harder it is to meet those demands. I think that neuromarketing needs to move away from this kind of black box, secret methodology approach. I have a secret formula that is going to give you information that's better than anybody else can give you. I think that the quality, the competitive advantages of neuromarketing companies does not come in having secret methodologies. I don't think that's particularly credible. It comes in having insights and in having methods and procedures that produce consistent quality results. So I would go with a vendor who I know, if they do 10 studies for me, those 10 studies are going to all be the same high level of quality. So I can rely on the results. I think that's much more of a competitive advantage than talking about some secret algorithm. So I think that's an important thing. Another big issue is neuromarketing speaks a language of science, and marketing speaks a language of insights and consumer needs. And we really have a kind of a gulf between these two ways of talking about things. So I notice when I talk to people that are on the insights teams, marketing consumer insights groups, they're sitting around a table talking about what kind of insights can we develop, to add to the value of our product, to make consumers feel more, ready and willing to use our products, increase the size of our market share, and so on. They're speaking a completely different language than the neuromarketers. So neuromarketers come in and say, well, I'm measuring attention and emotion and memory. And the marketers and the insights people go, well, but what is that, how does that relate to sales and loyalty and other factors that we're interested in? So there's a kind of gulf in the language and the terminology. I think that, and actually I think that both sides need to move together. I think marketing needs to take full advantage of neuromarketing. Marketing needs to be looking at maybe sometimes asking different questions. And neuromarketers need to be providing answers that are more relevant to the needs of marketers. You kind of meet in the middle. So that's a big challenge.
Very big challenge, yeah. Somehow the multidisciplinary, trying to construct a common language to work with. Nowadays, we the human beings are living in the biggest accessibility knowledge era. Either it's very cheap or it's even free to access knowledge on the one hand. On the other hand, in the context of neuromarketing, as the time is going by, the prices of the technology and the services, because there are more competence and as many other factors, are going down. So we are facing a context with these two characteristics: accessibility to the knowledge and accessibility to those technologies, and as the time is going by, more. I have read people that are claiming that they are doing neuromarketing with not necessarily clear background. What are the characteristics, the requirements, say, to become a good neuromarketer or to identify a good neuromarketing? Somehow you said about the scientific background, the scientific training. Is there any other important feature to search or to prepare in to become a neuromarketer?
Well, to be fair, you don't. Your two trends go together. You can learn from the scientific production of others. You don't have to do every experiment yourself. On the other hand, you need to be able to distinguish between things that are sort of achieving a cumulative acceptance in the scientific community and things that may have been a one-off study. A lot of times you'll see folks that are not scientists themselves will say, oh, I just read a study in Science Daily that said if you use these 3 words in your solicitation on your website, you'll increase conversion by 46%. That's one study, and you need to understand: was that an anomaly, or was that something that was that is consistent and reliable? So you can develop a repository of knowledge. There are some things that scientific results achieve, can be replicably used in situations where you kind of know they're going to work. I mean, they've worked before. There's an expectation they're going to work again. You can use that knowledge